beginnings of psychology was to link the four humours to psychological types. And here's the Jericho, it's going of its own accord.
Just press space bar.
Press what?
Probably press space bar. Go back.
Which is the space bar?
The big one?
Still going forward.
Save him. Oh,
I'm trying to go backwards. It's racing ahead of you.
Go hard.
Come on, Scott, deal with it.
Sorry.
No, it's Scott's fault.
Technology. No, won't go back.
What's phrenology? Is that when they do
That's the study of bumps.
bumps on your head? Yeah.
And they tried to link the four humours to the study of bumps.
It's appropriate after the oranges in the head. Yeah, well, I don't have any bumps.
Oh.
Not my brain.
That one later.
But still people who read stuff. They still do it.
Anyway, the studies of mental illness by Jericho are revealing. He not only related colouring to the humours, but believed character or personality could be read in the physiognomy, using the now discredited science of phrenology. There's a whole world of 18th, 19th century portraiture to be reinterpreted, looking at applying those ideas. Just some simple examples: weak chins, regal noses and proud foreheads provide another symbolic code that mostly escapes us today, but it was very popular in Victorian England. Of interest technically is the evidence ancient classical painters started to use a white undercoat for the figures, perhaps from sculptural painting practice. It's likely that this became a kind of model grisaille. And there were contemporary objections made against those modern artists who were corrupting painting by mixing coloured undercoats for the humours of their characters or narratives. Plato's followers were a bunch of wowsers who generally viewed all change as degenerate and feminine, read weak. The youthful transgressives won out, however. In Pompeii, an intermediate layer of white was required to isolate flesh colours from the coloured plaster backgrounds. And here are some astonishing mosaic and painting from Pompeii, which are preparing the ground for Byzantium. That's Green with Envy by Jericho, a study of a woman in a madhouse. It's an incredible mosaic. The colour in it is extraordinary.
How big would that one be?
I have no idea. This is all Pompeii. Quite extraordinary. Okay, now, to demonstrate the power of colour in times past, I want to introduce you.
What did you do to this one?
I don't know. It's got the slideshow.
I did. It is slow. It is in the slideshow.
Now, I've got hope that this works.
We trust you.
I don't trust me.
We need more light. I'm sure that's more harmony. Oh, we used to play with these since I was a kid.
This is a jinx. And if you have a look, you'll see that the black,
Weird.
red and white, you're seeing purple. And not only are you seeing purple,
The red purple.
but you're hearing the sound of heavy breathing.
You guys. Very red purple.
Okay, now we've got a jinx. Back again. You can go forward.
I hope
It's
so.
very figurative.
This is also a jinx. It's a modern version. The proper jinx pendant is double-sided. It had a representation of a bird on one side and a very long neck, and on the reverse it becomes a snake. When spun, the head of the bird turns its snake into a phallus, which is also in maize. Another version spins with the colours, that's the one I just showed you. Now these jinx cast love spells. The point seems to be that the subject sees things that are not there, especially purple, an erotic colour, and shock, horror, giggle, see penises. Tiffany writes, used purple flowers. Purple is the colour of blood under the skin and the hems of temple prostitutes. The jinx seems to have been the precursor of the wheel of life, or the wheel of fortune, with one side rising and the other falling, creating angst about right dextral and left sinister depending upon which side you were standing on. The red, white and black which caused the purple were Hecate's colours, she's a witch, and the moon of course could be red, white or black. Something similar, and I hope I can say this properly, is a quincunx with a Neolithic and Celtic ancestry. Spinning through time and space, travelling from the green present to purple eternity, is the quincunx or guilloche in Westminster Abbey in the mosaic floor. It's a cosmic map with complex meanings encoded. Now it's been suggested that the colour circle we know so well is derived from the jinx. Newton may have explored prismatic light so that he could invent the Pink Floyd cover, but don't forget his main interest was alchemy, to which we'll come soon. I don't want to spend too much time on the possible relations between Greek musical modes, there are several, and the visual arts, but there are links. The major and minor scales had an equivalent in the austere, robust, pure, strong, structural, male, red, yellow, black, white, and the florid, or mixed, impure, weak, decorative, female, orange, green, purple colours. In Lydian mode, for example, imagine a sombre funereal urn with the clay or whitish ground with light and grey, dark greens, purples, reddish to deep red, all set against the black glaze of the vase. You get the idea. For each musical mode there are appropriate colours and tones, and these link with humours, temperaments, religious ceremony and heraldry. It's all getting a bit confused. Now, as the colours' meanings get more inclusive, wider and more diffuse, that sets the scene for the expressive emotional use of colour, not tied to specific commonly understood symbols. Purists like Plato objected to this tinkering. Artistic freedom always comes at a cost. Personal, private symbols are not really symbols at all. To everyone else, they are meaningless. Now, the same can be said of Aboriginal art. Although the symbols are cultural as well as personal, to the uninitiated, the symbols are all but meaningless, which raises lots of questions about what the uninitiated see in it. But these are questions for French philosophers who seem to have met their semiotic match. The French adore Aboriginal art. Apollo is the Christ prototype. Greece and Rome provided all the expertise necessary for Christian realism. We saw it at Pompeii. Look at the subtlety of the light and colour in Apollo. But Byzantium turned its back on this world in deference to the next. By the time we get to the stylised icons of Eastern Europe, image creation has a new set of symbols. Pivotal was the ferment of the icon smashers, the iconoclasts, who set about destroying art. Thou shalt not make for yourself a carved image of any likeness of anything in heaven above, the earth beneath, or the waters under. Commandment number 3. Oh yeah, but what about symbols? Them's fighting words. Islam turned to mathematical and colour symbolism and the use of text as ornament to solve this problem. It was in the period of the 4th to the 7th centuries that issues such as the nature of Christ and the Trinity were debated. The old argument about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin? Well, the answer depends upon whether or not angels have material corporeal existence, in which case only one angel can stand on the head of a pin, or whether angels are immaterial spiritual beings, in which case you can have a million angels dancing on the head of a pin. It wasn't just, a silk cherry.
Same stuff goes on in superstring theory.
Yes, yes, yes. For the Catholic and Orthodox churches, the divine nature of Christ can be manifest even in his painted image, which in itself can perform miracles. Making an icon is a meditation on symbols. Gathering the materials invokes God's creation: animal, vegetable and mineral. Animal glue, vegetable wood, a reminder of the cross, and cloth, his robes, and minerals. Preparing the panel reminds us of the carpenter. After the white gesso is applied and smoothed, we have a representation of the blinding, uncreated white light before creation. The wooden edge represents the separation of this imperfect world and the perfect holy world portrayed. Transferring the design, it's incised into the gesso, and then a red ochre bowl, the blood of Christ, is applied to all areas to be gilded. Gold, which is incorruptible, is applied and burnished until it glows. A mixture of all the tetrachrome colours is applied to all flesh areas as a dark greenish brown called sanctia, and further dark colours to the drapery. These are applied in swirling brushstrokes reminding us of the primordial chaos, and slowly building layers of hatched light followed by washes of very thin colour called a float, then another layer, until finally we arrive at a point where the light comes from within the figure. The light from darkness, and this is all tempera from an egg, which is another symbol of life. Finally, the icon is given a coating of varnish and is blessed at the ceremony. I'd like you to note in this one the use of the red under the white. Gives that beautiful pinky purple colour. Remember the use of different layers underneath. Now, given this talk has been all about colour, we can note now that the icon tradition kept alive the basic Greek approach to flesh painting. Relying on the ancient palette, employing techniques using contrasting colours as undercoats, fadaccio, which is a mixture of all four of the tetrachrome colours, and awaiting the Renaissance. Now additionally, terra verte, this is a Michelangelo tempera, you can see the use of the terra verte under the lighter areas as well. So those greens were underlayers. Note the black hatching of the robe. Oh, you can't. Oh, yes, you can. The black hatching in Indian ink, basically. That's preparing for a float of ultramarine.
I was just going to ask, what was the reason for the green undercoat?
Right, it did two things. It gave the figures a swarthy olive Mediterranean complexion, and second, with the transparent glazes in the shadows, translucent scumbles in the half-lights, the warmer flesh tones were transformed to optical greys. This basically continued. Here's another Michelangelo tempera. This basically continues with the greys occurring in the flesh tones with warm over cool until Rubens, to ruin everything, started using warm colours like burnt umber in his blocking. Optical greys were no longer possible because there was no warm over cool or cool over warm, and Rubens had to introduce mixed grey paint to compensate. Now it was Alberti who first wrote about colour composition, a theme Vasari develops. In the disegno, Vasari says that brighter colours should be on the principal figures. These two began to distinguish between structural colours and melodic colours with contrasts and dissonances. This echo of the ancient Robusta and Florida included the new decorative dye colours. Dyes are not pigments, note. Fugitive colours had to be locked up in a glazed medium of resins and oil so that they didn't fade. But that's a Venetian practice. Before we go there, remember that Florentine riches were built on textiles as much as banking, so there was a lot of dyeing of materials and things going on, so there were new colours everywhere. We go to Santa Maria Novella Spanish Chapel in Florence. That's a very bad slide, but it does give you an idea of the scale. The mural is the most spectacular display of colour symbolism that can be seen anywhere in the Western world. Quote. It sums up the whole of the medieval curriculum in universities, and this can be read through colour language, subject by subject. Fanciful art speak if it wasn't backed up by semiotics, a pragmatic scenario, semantic imagery and syntactic liturgy. What will surprise you is how much you've already heard. The mural is dominated by the figure of St. Thomas Aquinas. He's founder of the Dominican teaching order. He's dressed in black over white. Now, as you know, all colours derive from black and white. Thomas thought beauty shone through from another more perfect world. That should sound familiar. So the purest, brightest colours shine in the heavenly host at the top, explaining the weird colours, and gradually dull to the mere mortals at the bottom. To show the saint's wisdom, all colours emanate from him. But the colours were official, prescribed by popes with liturgical meaning, and worn as a form of heraldry. White's consecratory and sacramental, that shows holiness and understanding, virtue and chastity. Black's for humility and rejection of the pleasures of the world. Pope Innocent III declared good for Good Friday and funerals. Now in those two, black and white, you wear your vows of obedience, poverty and chastity. That's what the black and white means. Red's for the feasts of the Passion, the blood of martyrs and Christ. It's the heavenly fire aflame with love. Green's an everyday colour. Green angels represent youth and the flower of the soul. It had been the colour of heresy. The Byzantine debates over the Trinity and the nature of Christ were deadly. But this had softened by the Renaissance, and now green displayed faith. Heretics might be wrong, but they stick to their ideas. The Virgin of the Immaculate Conception had green robes. Violet, hyacinth, is the colour of dry blood. It's used for penitence and confession leading to absolution. Hyacinth was accidentally killed by Apollo, and purple flowers were used in purity rites in ancient times. Amethysts signified dying in Christ. Oh yes, now we have to include the jewellery. Gold's not really a liturgical colour, but it could be linked to yellow and green. Being incorruptible, it's good for spiritual illumination. Topaz and chrysolite declared the wearer's dedication to the contemplative and virtuous life. Blue's non-liturgical, but the azurite or lapis lazuli was so beautiful. This was a problem, because the Hebrew Jewish high priests wore it. But St. Thomas himself saw beautiful things as being close to God, so its use was sanctioned, and its cost alone made it suitable for donors to lavish on the Madonna. Now, Paley goes on for 6 pages detailing the symbolism of this painting, and I'm not going to. The important point to make is that this kind of colour reading is only possible if you know the code. It's the code that's shared, linking artist, painting and viewer. You could make some educated guesses, but that's dangerous. For example, to complete Thomas's education, his parents paid a prostitute to educate him. Thomas chased her out with a firebrand. So the reds and oranges of flames can now represent chastity as equal as they can passion. Go figure. On a technical note, the painting was done over red, black and white undercoats. Colouring the plaster was common. This allowed a penitent purple to suffuse the work along with a pale green of faith. Now for something even more bizarre. You'll forgive me for leading you up the garden path for a while. Vitriol is sulfuric acid. The word vitriol contains a code. Visita interiora terrae rectificando invenes occultum lapidum. No, it's not a spell from Harry Potter. But it might as well be. Go down inside the bowels of the earth and rectify and discover the hidden stone. You've got it. The philosopher's stone that then turns things to gold. This alchemical process was code for two parallel meanings. One was the overt attempt to make gold, which everyone understood. The other was secret. The other was an educative program to turn a base character into a man of wisdom by going deep inside himself. And the symbol for vitriol, the heart, which was also the sign of the alchemist. And suddenly, we're back in ancient colour, because the vitriol mnemonic lists the stages of the process. Now, please don't ask me how 7 steps becomes 4, but it's going to sound pretty familiar. Melanosis, the blackening. On the chemical level, a black deposit called chaos is created in the kiln. The kiln was a square cube, hence the word incubate. On the human level, you withdraw to your cubicle, as the monks and nuns do, and try to absorb masses of unconnected data. Leucosis, the whitening. Chemically separate salt from sulphur to get albedo or white deposit, and then on the human level, use analysis and catharsis. We'll still use the same word. Purge yourself of inappropriate emotion and analyse rationally. Iosis, the reddening. A fiery meltdown yields the chemical rubido. The human process is synthesis by a conjunction of opposites, seeking knowledge of a higher order. And finally, xanthosis, the yellowing. The chemical goal is gilding, and the human goal is the creation of wisdom. Now, if you link all this to the idea that going through such a process would take all of the 3 ages of man, you can read Giorgiani's 3 philosophers. It's an alchemy manual. P.S. The purple, which our Arab friend is wearing, with the turban, is purple's for Mercury, the god of Interflora, a god of metal that is liquid when cold. It's a messenger and a god of change. The man who reads probably an Arab philosopher. It's likely that the young man in white is Giorgiani himself. Now, originally the cave was huge. This painting's been cut down. It was probably meant to be used for staring into, as a crystal ball or oil floating on the water was used to stimulate the imagination. Wait, I can see. So this painting has been chopped off almost in half. The cave was absolutely enormous and was probably used as a meditative device. Now, if you think, link all this, right? Oh, right, okay, we did that. Right. Now, one last painting. A portrait of this Giugiani. Doing his calculating. A portrait of Empress Isabella of Portugal. No normal portrait, since it was painted 6 years after her death by Titian for her husband, the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. Titian, the most Venetian of painters, was a member of the Florence Academy, and the kind of colour symbolism in Isabella was typical of his erudition. Artists in those days were in constant contact with the academies and universities, such as Padua and Bologna. They consorted with cardinals and merchants, mathematicians, astronomers, alchemists, dyers, apothecaries, doctors and lawyers. I hope I've shown how complex and ancient was the knowledge artists were expected to display. Their clientele was highly educated, or pretended to be. A knowledge of colour implied an understanding of church ritual, alchemy, medicine, psychology, heraldic association, classical mythology, and the healing properties of gemstones or crystals. Some things just don't change. Now, I can do no better than the quote from Hayden's book.